Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the European Poetry Festival 2023 interview series. My name is Richard Ettinger and I'm a student for English literature and philosophy. As someone deeply interested in creative writing and English literature and poetry, I'm very excited to introduce to you our today's guest, poet and filmmaker David Spittle.
Hello, thanks for having me, Richard. It's really lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Yeah, David took part twice in this year's European Poetry Festival, and I think he can introduce himself the best way by himself.
Well, I've taken part in the European Poetry Festival a couple of years, and it's always a real joy. I think the community that has grown around it and continues to grow around it is just a real joy to be a part of, and so it's definitely part of the poetry calendar, for want of a better term. That's really enjoyable. And yeah, I've known Steve now for quite a while, I suppose, like close on 9 years, 10 years, something like that. Always been a fan of his work, and it's just been a really stimulating and surprising always challenge to be collaboratively paired and to explore those kind of cultural, social, personal differences or kind of resonances that come up. And quite often, more than anything, it's been a wonderful point of departure for friendships as well as sort of creative projects. So yeah, I'm always really happy to be involved. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's good that like-minded people connect during festivals and yeah, through sciences and literature, basically. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a craft.
absolutely.
Um, I've got a question for you. What's an item you absolutely must take with you when you travel?
um, well, so you sent me these wonderful questions, and I don't have exciting answers because that's a sort of a very good like in England we got this radio show called Desert Island Discs on Radio 4, which is where all kind of lovely autumnal and well-meaning, well, I don't know, that's down to your opinion whether they're well-meaning or not, but all these wonderful programs come, and that feels like a very desert island question. What would you take traveling? And I don't travel in that much. Steve is a big traveler. I travel down England to come to the events. I've been on a tour to Norway, which was amazing for poetry. That was an amazing time. And my other traveling, I don't know whether it was because for a while I lived in various different places in America when I was a child, and we had a lot of moving around that I haven't traveled as much since, but I'd like to. But I'd say the most what I tend to travel with is a kind of surplus of impractical items, so books and an excessive amount of socks that no horde of humans or just ridiculous amount of people would ever wear. And I always forget the very necessary, essential things that a human being needs to function in the world. So yeah, definitely books. I'll even take DVDs. I'm a real fan of films and physical media, which is a kind of collecting habit that pendulously swings between repulsing me and I find full of joy and wonderful. So I've just been down in London with some friends for a while, and I took a lot of films, took quite a few books. So yeah, it's perhaps predictably and less excitingly just books and films, notepads, and yeah, just that kind of stuff really. So I mean, I would love to present something more spicy, like I never leave home without my bejeweled tortoiseshell that I procure from the ether via telepathic vibrations that are curated by a small mongoose called Gerald who travels in my other pocket. But no, it's nothing exciting like that. It's just too many books, too many films, and not enough practical skills.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, are those movies that you carry around? I think you said physical, right?
Yeah.
So are they not accessible online? Are they not like streamable, or do you just disguise like something that is streamed and you don't want to do it?
It's a mixture. It depends. So sometimes I'll be writing essays on films, and I kind of need the specific discs because it's about like I don't know, maybe some special features or something that's on there. But sometimes it's because it depends where I'm going. You know, if they got a DVD player, obviously I'm not that insane that I would just carry around stacks of plastic for no apparent reason. But yeah, I've never been really a massive streamer. I suppose it's amazing the amount of films that are on YouTube. That's incredible. And there are streaming platforms that I dabble in, but I'm not going to be plugging them here. But yeah, so that's pretty much the long and short of my strange traveling library or whatever it is that I take with me. Definitely notepads as well. You've got to scribble, and there's only so much that you want to be using a laptop or whatever if you have a laptop or whatever that you know.
Thanks for that. Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting. These questions are always answered in a different way,
Yeah.
and but I liked how you explained it. It makes definitely sense. So yeah.
Do you have a specific item that you take with you, like
I'm
a
not
talent?
bad for answering. No, I'm kidding. um, I think it's a book that I don't know. I read it since like 2019 or something, which I never really finish, but I portion it. So I like to read it like in the evenings before I go to sleep. I just do like 2 pages of it, and then I'm like, it's a ritual more or less. Yeah, and I could have chosen like a less thick book, but it just happened, and yeah,
Oh no, I love that. I can really relate to that. There are some books that I feel are just so comforting to have as a kind of constant in your life that you don't necessarily need to read in years. You know, you just go through little bits and bobs, and yeah, I really appreciate that. I was reading Robert Duncan's HD book. He's an American poet who wrote this really expansive, like brick of a book that kind of mixes his analysis of modernism via like kind of talking through the ins and outs of HD, Hilda Doolittle, Williams, Eliot Pound, and all those kind of things, as well as like diving into his own dreams and questions around the occult, specifically like Blavatsky and Yeats and stuff. And it's just like it's a mad long book that's almost got its own inbuilt failure in its ambitions, and I love that sort of thing. I love big modernist labyrinthine hubristic tomes, but also for a little while I found carrying an old battered copy of and it sounds like it's like hipster affectation to find a battered Penguin copy, but it was just pure luck that that's the one that got sent to me on yeah, online. But it was the Tao Tai Ching, and I found like reading that over and over again just was very calming, and so I really do relate to that kind of ritual. That's nice. I like that.
I mean, as you do it as well, I guess you can plow through a book like within a day or a couple of hours. But sometimes it's just a different feeling if you have it just with you, and you know, okay, I will do 2 pages, and maybe there's an action that is like really like building up, but you still say, okay, I'll leave it for tomorrow because I know it will be there, and I
Yeah,
want to enjoy it for a longer
yeah,
period of time and not just yeah.
yeah.
So
You're not like plowing through it. You're actually living with it and living in it for a while. I love that. Yeah, I think that's really a great answer. So I'm going to change what I said and go with what you said. That's
no. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I have some more questions, as you know, but let's go to the core of it. I mean, talking about your poetry, you did 2 collaborations within this year's poetry festival, and one was with the Swiss Evening, and you did it together with Regina Dürig, and the other one with the Austrian Evening, and it was together with Alessandro Burbank.
yeah,
Um, let's talk about the first one, the Swiss Evening. The
yeah.
theme was rocks, I guess, right? What was it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the wonderful thing I think about the collaborations is that sometimes it is literally like you'll find something that you're both enthusiastic about, and it will be like, this is a theme, and let's just compile notes back and forth and have an almost like poetic dialogue or something. And other times it will be a spliced, heterogeneous, strange affair, and others almost like a game or an improvised moment. And I think, obviously there are other methodologies or kind of interactions that will take you to other fruitful creations. But with Regina, she was so lovely, so friendly, and we had a really wonderful kind of correspondence back and forth that was very meandering and very just friendly, interesting and interested. She was traveling a lot at the time, so I was getting bits and bobs, and she was into I think she'd either just taken a course in or was particularly interested in stone sculpting. And I kind of just decided to leap on that slightly because I think I've always found rocks interesting and other great phrases to lead with. I've always kind of happily fostered these really bumbling amateur enthusiasms in certain sciences where I don't really have the mind to logically and rationally take them on in any kind of serious way, but they fill me with a lot of joy and wonder. And geology is one of those. So like when I was quite young, I remember we used to go on a holiday to Dorset and Suffolk, and in Dorset it's amazing fossil hunting. And so I got very interested in paleontology and kind of like all the different eras, Paleozoic or Cambrian or something, and got really interested in that. And then when I was at Suffolk, there used to be this amazing secondhand bookshop where we used to go on holiday, and I found this huge textbook on geology, which had a very cool front cover. And I coveted it from like age of 7 or whatever, thinking it was this like mysterious doctrine on how the earth spoke via tectonic oddities or whatever. And so I've always loved geology. My dad is actually studied geology at university, so I think he kind of helped me be interested in it. And so yeah, when Regina said that, I was like, oh yeah, let's just do something strange about stones and rocks. And it kind of intertwined with some other enthusiasms and other kind of interests that Regina had, that I had, kind of also reflexively playing with the correspondence we had as well, so collaging a lot of things and playing with found text and bits and bobs like that, all the kind of like recyclable classics of playful poetry. But I think a lot of it was, for me, the most joyful part of that was the performance, when I think we both just felt as though we were quite comfortable with each other and could just improvise a bit. And I decided to make a lot of strange noises, and I brought like a little amethyst and decided to pretend I was ventriloquizing the amethyst crystal, and just not necessarily in a new age crystal way, but in a kind of I am possessed by the rock kind of way. But it was good fun and silly. And I think afterwards I heard Steve Fowler talking to Regina, and he won't mind me saying this, and I think it was quite astute of him to say, but it cracked me up. He said, like, you were very good with Dave because he gets very distracted very easily, and you managed to steer the performance in a really kind of perceptive way. And ironically, as I overheard him saying this, I was distracted from a conversation I was meant to be having by listening to that. So it's absolutely true. But I think sometimes just with different performance partners, you realize parts of your character, parts of your imagination, parts of your enthusiasm that are perhaps blind to you, and that through relief, through another person's, soundboarding, you start to actually understand and be able to either use them or negotiate around them, or whatever it may be. And so I think for me that was a really fun thing, that we seemed to have like a good balance of understanding what the other was doing, which was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed. I took part in this performance. I mean, as a guest, as a listener, as a viewer. But it was capturing, and I think it was like about 15 minutes for those who weren't there, you can watch it online on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to plug it
You're
at some point.
exceptionally bored. You could look at 15 minutes of me talking to a stone with Regina,
Right.
long-suffering Regina, but making the best out of it. But yeah, it was so nice that it was a nice atmosphere, and yeah, it was fun.
Definitely. I mean, at some point you read out from a guide about collecting rocks and minerals, and you pronounce something like in a such funny way that you got a lot of laughs, and it was just like a guide for collecting rocks and
Yeah,
minerals, but the
yeah,
performance did it, right?
yeah, and all those things are always just like, I guess, and again, it's something that I should thank Steve for, because I think the more events I've done of his, and the more I've followed the poets who perform in and around those circles, the more I've realised how to enjoy performance as something not entirely separate from the page, but to kind of almost recognise that rather than necessarily wanting to replicate the experience of reading, which for me is like really important. That's how I write. I do sort of, although it sounds like a clumsy phrase, writing for the page. I I encountered poetry through not through a poetry scene, not through going to readings, but through reading and through loving that sort of almost meditative, exploratory, personal and private reading experience. So that is where I naturally go to, I think. But going to these performances and also having an interest in music and more transgressive, exciting art, I think I really enjoy the fact that there's a kind of a permission in those spaces to explore that in a way that's not doesn't need to be confrontational, but it can be uncompromising, and I think that's really important to be able to have the integrity in the work to do what you want to do in the strangest way, if that's what you're pursuing, but to still retain the kind of genial compassion of the collaboration and the audience. So it's not going for a cheap impact, but is playfully exploring what a performance might be, I suppose, if that doesn't sound too intolerably wanky, which it kind of does. But yeah, so like I said, Steve's performances and how he approaches performances have had a huge influence on how I've learned to play around with those parameters more.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. I think you answered with that also my next question, so we can skip that.
You can fold it back in. We can
Yeah.
rearticulate.
How much of a freestyle was it though? I mean,
A lot of it was like
mm,
made up. Not so the reading of the text, like what I was saying about my dad and geology and stuff. That was one of his old books from when he was a kid.
mm,
And I found it because we were recently clearing out my grandmother's house when she passed, and I just found all these old books. And something that I really love are those kind of deeply flawed and eccentrically problematic annuals that used to be done, like Boys' Own Adventures and all these kind of ridiculous, charming, but also strange, well-meaning oddities that were kind of within the within the mode and genre of encyclopedic and manual, I suppose, a little bit. And that was one of those. And it was just reading it. The style was funny, and so I was sort of playing around with that kind of clipped British voice, which is like that the kind of tinny microphones of the 30s or something. And I mean, when I did a PhD quite a while ago now, I studied John Ashbery, and I think that had an influence because a lot of the poems I loved of his, specifically The Skaters, which is a sort of long poem, I think, in Rivers and Mountains. It's weird to be so absorbed with a poet and a world of work, and then several years down the line, you're like, it's all hazy and spongy. But he collaged a lot of those kind of. The particular book he used was called something like 200 Things a Bright Boy Can Do, or five, something like that. And there's a kind of register and a tone in those books that is enchanted with a kind of wonder, but also almost like a scout book. And it has all these strange gender politics and these strange, like, definitely now very out of date, outmoded kind of ideologies running through it, but they make for such eclectic and fascinating reading. And I do like approaching those texts and integrating them somehow, because I do think they offer so much that we definitely don't really have I mean, all the problematic stuff aside, that kind of communication of the wonder of knowledge has, I think, been kind of overtaken by the overwhelming inundation of information. And maybe knowledge isn't the right word, but the kind of, a lot of it's very exoticized, so very colorful plates, strange illustrations. But it reminds me a lot of like how things like science have changed through from 19th century to 20th century. In the 1800s, you had all these amazing like natural historians writing fairly strange books that are wonderful, but also very dubious, So I was really happy to involve that. That was cool.
They're like little treasures from the past that just encapsulate what happened there, what was the thought by then, what was somehow also the society. I mean, it was written for someone and in a special way, which is not used to be anymore, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think that also looking at it like treasure is kind of lovely. That kind of the scurrying artifact of it, the scavenging, and the joy in that. I enjoy all of that.
interesting, yeah. Is English the only language that you write in?
Yeah, sadly. I'm interested in other languages, and I'm really grateful for being in communication with like poets from other cultures, from other countries, and especially during the way that England has gone with the stupidities of Brexit and our political changes and everything. I think it's more and more important, and I really value like having that communication, having a sense of what like poetry might be going on in various other places in the world. I think it's really really important, and it's something that I'd like to be more officious, more industrious with, but I'm easily distractible. And I guess like yeah, I mean, I read bits in translation and talk to other poets about translation, but I sadly don't have another language really. I mean, I studied, in the same way that most school kids do, Spanish and French up to a certain level in England, and but it's one of those things that I'd always like to try and explore a bit more. I quite like to try learning a bit of Italian because a few generations back I had sort of Italian family, and I've become through film and through studying Robert Browning, who kind of the Victorian English poet who came into my latest book. He moved to Italy, and there's so much around parts of Italian culture that I'm kind of fascinated in at the moment, and so it would be useful to speak more, but no, I'm pretty hopeless.
I see, I see. Yeah, I mean, English is like this international accessible medium, and yeah, how do you think? Is it like if more authors from different countries write in English, is it like a loss to culture, like when they express themselves in English because it's a different language than their mother tongue? Or is it something that like enriches English and also, yeah, goes the same way for the author?
I mean, obviously, it's probably not a question I'm best equipped to answer, but I think that um, in a way, it's kind of got to be both, I'd imagine. There's no way that English cannot not benefit from it or cannot, because of, if it's a second language and if you're bringing stuff from another language into it, it's going to be evolving, it's going to be bringing loads, and that's how parts of English came about anyway, um, and most languages really. Uh, but as a kind of personal experience, I don't know what that experience is like. I mean, I think selfishly, it's amazing for me because I don't have the other to be able to read more writers from different cultures when they are in English. But I mean, the press who published my first book, All Particles and Waves, and have just published Decomposing Robert, are based in France, and they're run by a wonderful poet called Paul Stubbs, also another wonderful poet, Blandine, who she works in translation a lot, and they do a lot of translations and side by side translations. And the first time I sort of I guess met them, not directly but indirectly met them, was one of my poems was translated into French in their magazine back in the day, and that was like a massive like honor, because so many of the philosophers that I love are from France, and so much of the history of surrealism or any of the good isms. There's loads of my influences and reading that have all been from Europe, really. And I think it's actually something I'm really interested in, how there is a kind of experimental and outsider constellation of English poets that draw more explicitly, more openly on European themes, but the mainstream and sort of public platforms of lyric English poetry have always been quite like staid and adverse to those influences in a lot of ways, in a lot of its more conservative areas. And so it's really important to me to feel as though that occasionally at these events I can meet people like that, or read contemporary French poets or that kind of stuff. So I feel incredibly lucky that that is the way it is. But whether or not it's for the better or no, I don't know. It's all it's an interesting area definitely to talk about. But I mean, how do you find it being? So English is your second language, is it? And German is your first?
Yeah, it is. I mean, German is my mother tongue, and English came when I was like 10 years old. So I was very late for the contemporary school system. Back in the day, it was different. But yeah, I chose to write in English as well, because I see it's like a medium that is like spread more and is more diverse. I mean, I feel a little bit, I don't want to say that, but there are some borders in the German language which I maybe haven't explored by now, but I see them in some way. But yeah, I just try to make it as open as possible, and what I can bring into the English language, I definitely try to make that. I mean, it's also like these these compound words that we have in German, like Zeitgeist, which are not like you cannot say it in English because it's just not part of the English language to do that kind of compounds. But if you look at it, you can get the sense, definitely. And that's what I also very like, that my mother tongue is brought into English, and somehow
and you should definitely like bring those compound words to explode into English. It'd be amazing. And that is an incredible part of German language. That's awesome. So you're based in Reading, is that correct, or whereabouts?
Yeah, I was in Reading. I spent there a full academic year, and my Erasmus year finished there, and I'm basically back in Düsseldorf right now. So
cool.
Yeah, Düsseldorf, Germany, and I enjoy my time here. It's all right. I mean, I really enjoyed England, be in the UK, and get another point of view from different professors. That was very important, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And are you writing much now from aspects of what you were studying, or is it taking different directions?
I mean, I write a little bit about what is like basically my sense of what happens in the world, and with my social environment, with what I experience. And I did a lot of like writing about what my feelings, my emotions, whatever, were back in England. So I did some of that.
Yeah. Amazing.
Right. Yeah. Coming to our last question, because I see we are running out of time. What advice would you give young poets which write in English which go to open mics, which try to make it as a poet in some way?
I would advise young poets to buy my latest collection.
Very good.
I'm absolutely joking, but do Decomposing Robert by David Spittle. Purchase it, my friends. No, advice to young poets. I've forgotten the question. What was it?
Yeah, just what would you say, like, when you start? I don't know. I mean, like,
I would say follow the stuff that you're interested in. It's really banal advice, I guess, but I think sometimes, especially if you are the sort of person who is tentacularly, insidiously integrated into online culture, it can be so overwhelming, and there can be this sort of strange pressure to keep up with, so a ridiculous amount of books. And I would just say nurture your own passions and follow that warren, follow that journey, because I think often it can be, we have a strange leveling out where everyone is trying to become aware of a huge amount of work, but on a very skimming surface level. Whereas I think you should probably embrace your intuitive enthusiasm and just follow that. And then on top of that, just find the people whose work you respect and become their friends. I think things like that, that's important. It's the people around it, and also just taking your own intuitive interests seriously, and not to feel buffeted or pressured by the onslaught of everything else.
Great, brilliant. That's such a huge answer. Thank you for that.
That's all right.
Yeah, I hope everyone who's listening right now can take something from it. And from my point of view, it's definitely helpful. So yeah, I encourage everyone to listen to these words. And yeah, so thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that you enjoyed it as we did, and see you. Where can we see you next? I mean, is there anything you can plug? Is there a show coming up, or another book you publish?
David Spittle, Decomposing Robert from Black Herald Press. And then other than that, there should be, there'll be more things, but that's the thing to, that's the takeaway. But yeah, it's been lovely to chat to you, Richard. Really, really nice.
Thanks so much, David. See you soon. Bye bye.
Goodbye.